Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Zack, and this is episode 560 of the Lawyerist podcast, part of the Legal Talk Network. Today, I'm talking with lab coach Leticia DeSuze about some of the hidden struggles that even successful law firms have.
So, Zack, you talk about hidden struggles, and you were just sharing with me that your track team is struggling in a new way. So, what does that look like?
Yeah. Kind of positive, intentional struggles. While we're recording this, some of the guys from my track team are competing in the region decathlon, and the decathlon is, as you can imagine, 10 events. 10 very different events. It's kind of a sampling of the horizontal jumping, the vertical jumping. It's got pole vault in it. Kids that do pole vault have to be able to throw discus and shot put and hurdles and all that. And generally, you get a kid that's really good at one or two of the events. And so 8 of the events are well outside of their comfort zone. And while I'm watching the decathlon, I just like it's inspiring. I'm like, I watch them with awe because here are 14 to 18-year-old kids, and they're just willingly stepping out of their comfort zone to test themselves. And in many of the events, they are going to lose because they're throwing against somebody whose best event is throwing. Well,
Right.
okay, I'm going to beat you in the long jump though, but it gets me thinking about what are those things that we know are outside of our comfort zone that just stretch us.
Yeah, and as adults, how often do we just play it safe, right?
Yeah.
How are we challenging ourselves personally and professionally? I think it's a good question.
That's not to say like, hey, you're a family lawyer, go, tee up a bunch of immigration stuff right now. But, are you, is there a piece of software that can you get a little more familiar with artificial intelligence? Can you say, okay, I'm not super comfortable with it yet. What can you be a novice at for a minute? Because that's the other thing. These kids are novices at, I'd say, at least 8 of the events every time. And in 2 years, they're going to be really good at it. But it takes
Yeah.
the 2 years.
And don't be afraid, even if it's something maybe you're good at, to approach it with that novice mindset. Maybe you're coming in and asking new questions or asking, why do we do it this way? Why do you throw it, in this manner?
Yeah.
Might uncover, and sometimes as the seasoned pro, I know being asked a question kind of makes you stop and think, wait, what? Yeah, why do we do it that way? So even if you're doing something you're just used to doing, stopping and asking some questions and challenging those assumptions.
Yeah, that's a good point because the kids, we'll have 3 kids out there or 4 kids out there and they'll all have different things that they're good at and they all teach each other. But them having to, as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, teach these other kids how to do something makes them better at it. I wonder what people kind of out there in podcast land do to like stretch their brains to get themselves out of their comfort zones and we as lawyers a lot of times are very good at things, or we're used to being A students, we're used to being successful, and it's really really tough to go and almost intentionally do something that you're going to be unsuccessful at the beginning.
Yeah, I love it. I love the challenge. I'm going to think on it. I'm going to come back. I'll report back on what I do. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm ready. But now let's check out your conversation with Leticia.
Hi, I'm Leticia, and I am one of the business coaches here at Lawyerist. I'm in the trenches every day behind the scenes with lawyers who are growing their firms, and I'm happy to be here.
Leticia, thanks for being with us today. Like you said, you're one of our business coaches here at Lawyers Lab, and you're in the trenches with lawyers every day, figuring out what it is that's working, what's not working, what may seem like it's working and isn't working. And you and I've been talking about leadership strategy and how a lot of firms don't necessarily have. We've got marketing strategies, we got financial strategies, we've got business strategies. And sometimes when those things take off, it can show us that we probably needed to have a leadership strategy too, somewhere in our firm. What are you seeing as it relates to lawyers kind of having to be the sole leader, the bottleneck sometimes in their firms.
Well, that is exactly what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of lawyers quietly unraveling behind the scenes because they are the bottleneck,
Mm-hmm.
because they haven't built leadership into their firm, into their team. And also because they themselves are not always equipped as leaders. They haven't gone from lawyering to leading effectively once you start to grow teams. And so more money, quote unquote, success, I think it just amplifies the gaps. And I'm seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, I wasn't, being a lawyer myself, having gone through law school, having run my firm. I, the only place that I was taught to lead, thankfully, was my father, who was running the firm with me. How are lawyers expected to kind of learn how to do that?
Well, it's just like if you own a law firm, how are you expected to learn to run it as a business? You have to learn a whole different skill set. So, practicing law is one skill set, business skills are one skill set, leadership skills are an entirely different skill set, but you need all of them to run a
Mm-hmm.
firm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how you're expected. You gotta get in there and learn. You gotta trial and error, invest in yourself to develop yourself as a leader, because it's a whole different animal when you're growing beyond just when it's just you doing all the things.
Yeah. So I guess what are you kind of seeing with some of our labsters or some of our potential labsters in their like boots on the ground sort of problems with this? How are you seeing this um, manifest? If I'm an attorney and I'm saying like, okay, I know I'm struggling, but to me in this conversation, there's one thing is, can I personally lead?
Mhm.
And then another thing is, am I developing kind of a second tier of leadership? How do I figure out where my problem is? Like where can I attack?
Well, the way that I'm seeing it right now is when everything still runs through the leader, when
Hmm.
decisions are still that somebody else should be able to handle, that those decisions are still running through the leader, that the leader is constantly interrupted because the staff needs to figure out or how to do something. So, one of the first things is being able to delegate down to the lowest possible level. Like, what's on your $400 plate? That should be on somebody's $25 an hour plate and stay there
Yeah.
with KPIs that they are held accountable to. Like, that's probably one of the easiest ways. But I
Hmm.
think sometimes it's also a shift in the mindset of, I want it done right. I'd rather just do it myself. It's faster to do
Right.
it myself. And so people resort to that because they're already time strapped.
Yeah.
And what does that say to the team? She's going to check it anyway. She's got it anyway. So I can just kick back and let her do it.
Hmm.
I see that over and over. So the payroll becomes almost parasitic because you're still doing all the things.
Yeah, because you're the one that looks at it before. I mean, now there's an element. There are things that we do as lawyers that we have to look at before it goes out the door.
For sure.
But there are other things. So I got kind of two directions
Okay.
here. One is if I'm a lawyer trying to figure out how to delegate these things, that's not necessarily in my natural inclination.
Yeah.
It's not in my natural inclination to give people things. I think in two ways. One is it feels like asking for help. Well, A, I pay these people, but B, if you want something done right, do it yourself. I think a lot of lawyers have that feeling. So talk to me about these KPIs. That seems to be, or at least that's the way that I've kind of gotten my head wrapped around delegating. Like, talk to me about some of these KPIs that we might be able to use in order to figure out, are people doing these things well? Am I delegating well?
Well, for every role in a law firm, they need to have a very clear job description with roles and responsibilities outlined so people
Mhm.
know here's what you're being held responsible for. But then, how do we know that you're successful in this? How is
Right.
this actually measured? So, KPIs, key performance indicators, are simply saying here's the 3 to 5 things that we need to look at to make sure that you are doing the thing that you're being paid to do.
Mhm.
And a lot of people have the job descriptions and they may go so far as to have the KPIs, but not having meetings with people and not using the KPIs to make sure that everybody is holding their weight in the firm.
I don't have the time to do all this stuff. I have to delegate this off anyway. I don't have the time to have meetings with people.
Okay, so here's the other thing, right? You are where time comes from. You own the firm. Like,
Mm,
it's going to be counterintuitive, but if you don't have time to meet with your team, then you're either going to have to hire somebody to be in that, and that you're going to have to buy back your time through hiring. But
yeah.
the things can't go undone because at some point they start to show themselves, and I'm seeing them show themselves in stress, in headaches, in sleepless nights, in joint aches, right? And they start to show themselves because the law firm owner is carrying so many of the things, and then they don't have people who are capable of self-leadership and autonomy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I want to hang on for a second, because like what we're trying to solve is this idea that lawyers are always going to burn out. That's part of the game, is
Yeah.
that law is a burnout. We're just chasing, we're trying to make enough money before we functionally break. But that's what this is solving. If you can have a successful firm, but you can be, like massively personally unsuccessful because you're just breaking yourself. And so
Yeah.
hiring people to do the job is helpful. But where I also get hung up is this like second tier of hiring. We were talking about this like leadership strategy is I can teach myself how to lead potentially, but then we also have somebody like an office manager.
Mm-hmm.
How do I guess, empower them to help me? Because now I've taken a step away. I'm not even worried about the KPIs of my intake specialist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried about the KPIs of my person who's worried about the KPIs of my intake specialist, you know?
Yeah. So ideally, you want to get to a place where you're hiring leaders across the board. So, not
Mhm.
leadership is just like the managers, but leaderships that are the leaders are in intake, leaders are in all parts of the firm. Because when I say leadership, I mean self leadership and autonomy, critical
Mm.
thinkers, like hiring people that own their responsibilities and that are accountable to themselves. Like this is how I operate. I take initiative, I get things done. And when you start to hire people like that, it's not based on title or level. It's based on, we hire people, these are the KPIs. We hire people who have the ability to critically think, have the ability to problem solve, have the ability to figure things out, people who take initiative. So that becomes the way that we hire, right? Not just, this is just the second level of leaders.
Mm.
We have to
Okay.
start thinking about the caliber of people that we are hiring. The other part of that is going from leader to coach in such a way before you go and solve the problem. Why don't you ask, Zack, why do you think this is happening? What do you think is possible? Right? You want to call people higher into ownership and critical thinking so you can develop a team of leaders and not just have people hanging on your every word, or you have to jump in and do all the things. And you know what? That takes time. And because
Mhm.
so many people are time strapped, guess what? They just stick with this parasitic model that's just wearing them out.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And well, what that kind of makes me think of, and again, I'm a lawyer at heart, and I am stressed about people doing things wrong at heart. So when I pass these things off and I give people autonomy, how am I making sure that I'm balancing autonomy with kind of like my duty to make sure they're doing things correctly?
Let's just say if you've got a team of, let's just say 7, right?
Hmm.
If you're an attorney and you have an office manager, or you have someone there who can own the other functions of the firm, just even from a KPI standpoint, even if they're not the person who's doing it, then your meetings are with this person primarily. They
Hmm.
are meeting with the rest of the team to ensure that those KPIs and that those other things are being done. So, of course, it's going to be different based on how people's firms are set up, but we
Yeah.
need to put leadership structures in place, not necessarily from a hierarchical standpoint, You see how I said that? Not necessarily from that standpoint, but just so that everybody owns what it is that they're doing so we can triage. If something is happening in marketing, somebody owns that function, even if they're
Mhm.
not solely responsible. If something is happening in intake, somebody owns like what our conversion rate is supposed to be. Like somebody owns that. And because
Mhm.
there's just this hodgepodge, all these, and nobody owns anything and nobody's accountable, there's not a lot of clear KPIs. It's just a shit show.
Every time I talk with you, my brain always is like, okay, so what I really need to do is I need to make my freaking, operations manual. Like, I need to have like, it seems to me here, and this is just, again, because I'm a processes person, like, you gotta get your processes down. If you've got your processes down, if you've got how you do something,
Mhm.
now you can hire somebody to do that way, and then you can hold them accountable for that. So yeah, it seems like the KPIs, because I'm thinking like, oh, well, what would the KPIs be? What would the KPI? And obviously the answer is it's different for everybody, but the KPIs would be driven from those processes. Are you getting the processes done correctly?
Correct. And then once you have the processes outlined, I think it's also very important that you hire implementers and doers.
Mm,
Right. You have to have people who are strong implementers and doers. Like that, I see so many things where people are like, oh, well, how do I do this? And I'm saying initiative says, look it up, try and figure it out. Come to
yeah,
me as the last option, right? Just take some initiative. But if I know that I can always count on you to chime in, guess what? I can just kick back because you're gonna spoon feed me whatever it is that I need. And you
yeah,
actually do a disservice to people when you don't allow them to figure things out and develop.
yeah. Well, I mean, provided that's their style and they want to do that. So how do I hire that? How do I find that? Because I think that's one of the things is a lot of times when we're trying to hire people, I don't know, lawyers aren't good at hiring. I was never good at hiring. I was never good at finding the right person, asking the right questions, trying to figure out how they work. How are they going to fit into my company? So how do you suggest people go about do that?
Well, this is, just like when we talk about having people who are in the right fit and people that are in the right role. You as the firm owner, you need to be clear on what the your needs to have are and what nice to haves are, both
Hmm.
from a cultural fit and both from a competency standpoint, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then allow people to demonstrate for you how they've done that. Like I
Mm.
feel like sometimes people are either hiring from a place of desperation, and so they hire very, very quickly. Um, and then,
Sometimes, so every
right,
now and then, I've seen a lawyer do that. Yeah,
yeah, and because like having somebody is better than nobody, they end up being held hostage by poor hires.
yeah.
But I'm saying like take the time to get clear on here's what we need, here's the skills gap here. These are the things that we need, and then put together the position based on like what you actually need in the role. And I'm a fan of just like I don't like what do you call it? Like those pet interviews. So tell me about yourself. Tell me
Mm,
this. Like I like just like real life and real live discussions, right? So you can see in real time how people think about things
yeah.
based on what it is that you're asking them to do.
If I'm starting at kind of zero, like
Okay.
I'm a solo, I might have somebody working in my office with me, and I've got them. We've got a pretty good we've got a pretty good rhythm, but obviously I need more people.
Hmm.
How do I go from I don't know what the hell is going on, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm blanket overwhelmed to okay, I'm I've got a good idea of who I should hire. Like what do I need to put down all my processes? Do I need to make a list of what all things I'm missing? What skills these people need? How do I go about from like a blank sheet to, three options of decent people?
Well, I can remember talking to actually one of the people, one of the lawyers who is a part of Lawyerist, and we went through this like, who do I need to hire? And I'm saying, okay, you as the attorney, what's on your plate that could be delegated down? And so she came up with her tasks. She had a very strong paralegal. She had a legal assistant. I said, who has things that are on their plate that could be delegated down? By down, I mean like someone else could do this. This is not the highest and best use of their time.
Right.
And so when they came up with those things, they're like, okay, the things that could be delegated down to the lowest possible level, we pop those things into Chat GPT to say, what might this position be and what can we call it? Right.
Yeah.
So we ended up with, in that sense, a legal operations coordinator, which was a hodgepodge of these things that would free them up to do to operate in the highest and best use of their skill set. So there's more than one way to think about it. If you're a solo and you have one person helping you, if your revenue were to double, what would break? What's breaking now? Like where are you feeling the pain right now? And is everything off of your plate that could go to this person's plate? And if you're saying, you know what? She's got everything she can handle, but I still have too much on my plate. Well, what are the nature of the tasks that are on your plate? Are they operational? Are they client service? Like where can you delegate down? And so instead of thinking, I need a receptionist or I need a paralegal, let's look at the tasks. Let's group the tasks. Are they administrative? Are they marketing? Are they tied to intake? Right. And then we can say, okay, this is who we need. Do we need this person on a full-time basis? Do we need a hybrid? Right. And so it's just like brainstorming a little bit to see what's going to give you the greatest bandwidth.
Sounds like, I mean, bringing in the rest of your team. Also,
so it depends on how many there are in your team. So in the first lawyer, I think there might be like 5 of them. So it does make sense. Like, let's think about this as a team. But if you're a solo or if it's just you and another person, then you have less people to think through this. So just think through the tasks, right? You just think through what are you doing? I remember talking to an attorney and he said, I think my clients love the fact that when they call my firm, I answer. And I said, how much money are you losing as a receptionist? Just curious. They may love it, but you're bleeding money because your rate is $400 an hour and you could be doing something different.
Well, yeah, and they may love for you to come pick them up from their house to bring them to the office.
Right, exactly. So I was saying, you think this is client service. You're doing your clients a disservice because there are cases you could be working on. There's other things that you could be doing and having a really incredible person who makes everybody call the firm feel like they're getting a warm hug. They're criminals. There was a criminal defense lawyer. They need that, right? So I'm just like, let's think about this strategically.
Yeah. Well, so one thing I could harp on for forever is I think my clients love that when they call in, they get me. That's not even, he didn't even necessarily, or that person didn't necessarily even get feedback. No. They hadn't figured out that my clients do love, and they've all said that they will leave if, no, I think my clients. So that could be another podcast of getting, getting feedback from your clients. In doing this exercise of kind of like trickling down the tasks that can be delegated, one of the things I think a lot of attorneys run into, or at least, and I'm just basically saying a lot of attorneys are me. One of the things that I run into is trying to figure out whether or not my other people, my assistants, my associates, all that, are working at, and I don't want to say maximum capacity, because you honestly, like, you don't really want to work people at maximum, like, and what is maximum capacity, but are working at an optimal capacity. How do I figure out if they've got the right amount on their plate as we kind of trickle these things down?
That's a really good question. It could be a team thing. It can be an owner thing to determine. I ask this question a lot. Is your team at capacity? Well, they say that they are at capacity. Okay, well, what do you consider capacity for this role? That's because the roles are tied to the firm, not to the people, right? Because if the people are gone, we can't have, right? And so I'm just saying, if the people are saying, you're saying this is capacity, there is 75% of what you're saying either is capacity, either there is a disconnect about what capacity actually is in your practice, and there might be things that you aren't considering, or the people need help. Like one of the things. So sometimes determining, it depends on the practice area. For some, attorneys or paralegals, it's caseload, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's billables. So I think it depends on the practice area, but that is a very important thing to determine what capacity looks like, because you definitely don't want people completely at capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is, instead of saying, is this person able to handle X? It's, should this role be getting
Correct.
X
Correct.
done?
If the roles are tied to the people,
Mm-hmm.
then you're building your firm based on variables, right? Not things that, because
Mm-hmm.
people leave, people change, people's capacity change based on lifing, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if this is what's required of the role, if for whatever reason this person is no longer in the role and we're hiring again, this is what's required for this position to contribute what we needed to contribute in the firm. And a lot of times that's not even something that's determined.
That also dovetails in the trying to find a new person as well. Is we've scoped the role. If I'm trying to find it, then we're going
Uh-huh.
to scope the role. We're going to figure out how much that role is supposed to do and hire for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so figuring that out for your existing roles is normal. Not only normal, but advisable.
It is advisable. Figuring this out across the board is period. I'm going to tell you where sometimes people are reluctant to do it, because sometimes people are afraid of the pushback from the team,
Mm-hmm.
afraid of, if we set these standards, have these boundaries, that my team is going to be more overwhelmed. Or whenever you change anything in a firm or in a business, people either rise to it,
Mm-hmm.
or ultimately they self-select out. And either of those is okay.
Yeah.
If this is something that you've determined needs to happen for the firm to run successfully, which is why I say the roles have to be tied to the firm and not the people. It's not that the people are not important, but they can't be the driver of these decisions.
Well, and if you're not giving people KPIs, if you're not giving people elements of what their job is, if you're not giving them good job descriptions, if you're not saying this is what is expected of this job, then okay, for me, that increases the stress of that job. If I don't know what it is, because then A, it can be variable, and B, it's whatever I kind of think it is, and I'm going to make it the worst thing for me. I'm going to make it difficult in my brain, and that's going to hang over me. Whereas, there's a kind of kindness to giving,
Clarity.
to clarity. Yeah,
Mhm.
like I always think of, like, good fences make good neighbors. Like, yeah, we have to hold people accountable for things, but when we do that, when there's clarity there, we have a better relationship.
Yeah, when people know what's expected,
Mm-hmm.
and you've communicated what's expected, they know what's expected, it definitely is a better relationship, because there's no guessing. Outside of KPIs, outside of clarity, I don't think people actually feel secure in their roles within a firm, because nothing feels solid or certain, and so people are just kind of going along to get along.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great thing when you can tell people, in this role, this is what success looks like. So
Mm-hmm.
I know on my own if I'm successful or not based on what it is that I'm doing,
Yeah.
right? If the goalpost is moving or if it's not clearly defined, it's just a constant guessing game, and it's subjective.
When we started this conversation and we were talking about leadership strategy, when I think of leadership, I think of George Washington crossing the Delaware. I think of somebody standing on the front of the ship and yelling charge, or leading by example of working really hard and answering emails at 3 a.m. But that's not good leadership, to answer emails at 3 a.m. But really, and I think if somebody had come into this conversation halfway through, they wouldn't recognize that we were talking about leadership. But it seems like leadership is providing structure,
Providing
clarity.
structure and hiring people who own the outcomes tied to the structure that you provided.
Well, so that's not as difficult
Right. It's not
as
it's not
being.
title. You
Yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah.
yeah, honestly, that's not as difficult as like I think of it as like the captain of the team. Like I don't have to be the captain of the team. I just have to be the leader. I have to
I
be the one.
heard I heard with my own ears. I heard an intake person say, our number of leads that we need every month is this. We didn't get that. We got this. And so here's the gap between where we should be and where we are.
Mm-hmm.
That person owned their role
Mm-hmm.
around intake. They knew the numbers, they knew the KPI. And
Mm-hmm.
so that intake role, I don't know how much that is, but
Yeah.
they were a leader, very much a leader in their own right, an intake leader, not the leader of intake,
Uh-huh.
but an intake leader.
And so by providing this clarity, by providing this structure, you don't have to be standing at the front of the boat. You're
Correct.
providing, you're facilitating
Yeah,
an environment where people can lead and be successful themselves.
correct. And so when you give that clarity and you give that structure, then you also give trust.
Mm-hmm.
And you trust that you're hiring people who will own it and who will carry it out. And so then you don't have to micromanage. It's not that you don't have the meetings in place so that you're going over those things, but then you can trust that you've hired people who can carry out the vision of the firm, right? And so that you want to hire strong leaders.
Yeah.
For every position. I don't care if they're opening the doors for people coming in, if you have people coming in. It's just like we want leaders and people who take ownership, people who know if they're off of their KPIs and say, I'm off here. Here's either where I need help or support, or this feels a little bit off. Like you need that from people and people because those people lead alongside you.
So I'm going to go a little weird here to wrap it up. Not weird, but a little different. What is, because we've already talked about steps you can take to find these people. We've already talked about steps you can take to become this. We've already talked about that. What is one way, what is one way that you like, that you really appreciate for people to kind of quote unquote reward that sort of initiative leadership within the firm?
I like it when a leader has taken the time, if their team is, small enough and it's not like we're talking about 200 people, to know the way people like to be rewarded.
Okay.
Some people like a pat on the back. Some people like a shout out. Some people are like, no, I want a day off. No, I want money. Right.
Yeah,
Everybody is innately motivated by different things. And so if you create a way so that what innately motivates this person, you're going to see more of whatever they get rewarded for. So instead of just having this blanket way, that is one way that's just like, like Bonusly allows people, if you want to save your money and get money, you can do that. If you like shopping, then you can use your things for shopping, right? So finding a way so that everybody's quote unquote reward love language is given to them. Some people are money motivated. Show me the money. You don't have to say my name. If I can put it in the bank, we don't even have to know it was me, right? So
yeah. I like that. And I know Lawyerist, when I was first getting hired, that's kind of one of the questions they would ask. And so I wonder if people could put that in there. We just talked about hiring somebody in order to hiring leaders. Wonder if you could put that in your kind of hiring intake.
My daughter, she's 29 now, but they did a commercial for her school when she was about 6 years old. And at the end of the commercial, she said, "Hey, are we getting paid for this commercial?" And they kept it in because people thought it was so funny. She was so serious. And she is innately motivated by money, by how she can make money doing something. And so we all have innate motivators. And when those can be tied to work and what we do at work, it's just you just get more of what people just are naturally drawn to do.
Yeah. Love it. Well, my innate motivator is nachos.
Yeah, let's see. Mine.
In case anybody's keeping score.
It could be money depending on what it is, but it's probably more time. Like I love time. I love autonomy over time. So anytime I can like have time to do whatever it is that I want to do with it, it's probably time and then experiences.
Well, I'd love to know what our listeners are motivated by. I would love to know that in the
Or if they
comments.
find out what their teams
Yeah,
are
what's your team
motivated
motivated by? You know, is it the pizza party? Do they care about the pizza party? Do they care about more days off? Do they just want bonuses? Do they want to shout out on your social media? You know,
if you ask people, if you really ask people and listen to the feedback, people will help you lead them.
Yeah.
If you really listen to people, people will tell you what's important to them. But if you're just like, this is how it's going to be, then you're going to miss those cues, and not necessarily have one of those best place to work cultures.
Yeah. Won't get to put that on the door
Correct.
anymore. Well, Leticia, this has been really good. I thought we were going a different direction with the leadership, because like at the beginning, I like I said, I think Washington crossing the Delaware, but really, I love this. Leadership is creating that structure
at every level.
Yeah.
Leadership at every level, not just like your firm administrator or your operations manager. Leaders are in your intake team. Leaders at every position.
Yeah, and then we just need to make sure we're being intentional about facilitating that.
Correct.
Love it. Well, Leticia, once again, thanks for being with me. I always appreciate chatting with you about all this.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.